The diplomatic station orbited peacefully between three star systems, a testament to 2 centuries of careful negotiation and mutual respect. Ambassador Chen Wei had grown comfortable in this routine, watching the daily exchange of trade vessels and cultural envoys through the massive observation deck. The Zephyrian crystalline ships gleamed like jewels as they docked alongside the organic living vessels of the Verdani Collective. It was beautiful, this harmony that had taken generations to build. Marine Corporal Jake Morrison stood at his post near the main entrance, his dress blue uniform crisp, despite the artificial gravity that always felt slightly off to human sensibilities. At 24, he was one of the youngest Marines ever assigned to diplomatic duty, chosen specifically for his calm demeanor and cultural sensitivity training. The brass had been clear. Humans were still the newcomers in this ancient alliance, having joined the Galactic Concordat only 50 years ago. Every action mattered. The morning briefing had been routine. 3 delegations arriving for the bicentennial celebration of the Treaty of Kepler Station, the historic agreement that had ended the last major interstellar conflict. Representatives from 47 species would gather to renew their commitment to peaceful coexistence. Morrison had memorized the protocols for greeting each species, from the Zephyrians who communicated through harmonic crystals to the gaseous Etherians who required specialized atmospheric chambers. The first sign of trouble came at 0847 hours. Ship time. Morrison noticed the unusual formation of approaching vessels on his tactical display. Instead of the scheduled single diplomatic cruiser from the hegemony of Krix, 12 warships had dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Their hull configurations were unfamiliar, angular and aggressive in design. Bearing no diplomatic transponder codes, Ambassador Chen received the transmission first, his face draining of color as he listened to the harsh, guttural language being translated by the station's AI. The Krix delegation was not coming in peace. After 200 years of silence, they were announcing the end of the Treaty of Kepler Station. Their message was simple. Humanity's rapid expansion and technological advancement posed an existential threat to established galactic order. The younger species had grown too powerful, too quickly. Morrison watched through the observation deck as the Krix fleet advanced, their ships bristling with weapons that hadn't been seen in active space for 2 centuries. The other diplomatic vessels began emergency departures, their crews unwilling to be caught in whatever storm was approaching. Within 30 minutes, the station went from bustling hub of interstellar diplomacy to an isolated outpost facing an approaching enemy fleet. The Krix had been founding members of the original alliance, their empire spanning dozens of systems across the galactic core. They were an ancient race, their civilization dating back millennia before humans had even discovered fire. Their technology was sophisticated but stagnant, unchanged for centuries. They had watched with growing unease as humanity's aggressive innovation had revolutionized everything from faster-than-light travel to agricultural techniques. Emergency protocols activated throughout the station. Blast shutters sealed observation windows, defensive shields powered up, and the skeleton crew of 30 humans prepared for the unthinkable. The station had been designed as a symbol of peace, its weapons systems minimal and primarily intended for asteroid defense. Against a Krix battle fleet, they might as well have been throwing rocks. Captain Sarah Rodriguez, the station commander, assembled her staff in the command center. Her voice was steady despite the circumstances. The nearest human fleet is 6 days away at maximum burn. The Zephyrian Defense Force could reach us in 4 days, but they've already stated they won't risk war with the Krix over a human diplomatic station. Morrison felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The Treaty of Kepler Station had been signed after the bloodiest war in galactic history, a conflict that had consumed entire star systems and left billions dead. The surviving species had sworn never again, creating an intricate web of alliances and protocols designed to prevent exactly this situation. Now that peace hung by a thread, and somehow humanity was at the center of it. The Krix fleet reached optimal firing range but held position, their intentions unclear. Ambassador Chen attempted diplomatic contact, invoking every treaty and protocol in the galactic legal framework. The response was a recording, transmitted on all frequencies. The voice belonged to Supreme Commander Thekvar, leader of the Krix military caste and descendant of the original treaty signers. His words chilled everyone who heard them. The human plague spreads too quickly, adapts too efficiently, learns too much. In 50 years, they have accomplished what took our ancestors 5,000. They are not content with their assigned territories or predetermined roles. They seek to remake the galaxy in their image, and we cannot allow this contamination to continue. The transmission continued with a formal declaration. The Cricks were withdrawing from all treaties involving humanity. They demanded the immediate cessation of human expansion, the surrender of all colonies established in the past 20 years, and the acceptance of permanent technological limitations. Humanity would be contained within a designated area of space, monitored and controlled to prevent further disruption of galactic stability. Ambassador Chen's response was immediate and defiant. The human delegation rejects these terms categorically. We are a sovereign species operating within the full rights granted by galactic law. We have honored every treaty, respected every boundary, and contributed to the prosperity of all allied civilizations. The Cricks commander's reply was a single word: unacceptable. At 13:47 hours, the Cricks fleet opened fire. The first salvo struck the station's outer ring, overloading defensive shields and causing massive structural damage. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in red as atmosphere began venting from compromised sections. Morrison felt the deck plates vibrate under his feet as secondary explosions rippled through the station's superstructure. Captain Rodriguez's voice echoed through the communication system. All hands, prepare for evacuation. This is not a drill. But as Morrison looked at the tactical display, he realized the horrible truth. The Cricks had positioned their ships to prevent any escape. The few shuttles and escape pods the station possessed would be destroyed the moment they launched. They were trapped, witnesses to the end of the longest peace in galactic history. The young Marine checked his sidearm and straightened his uniform. If this was how the peace died, he would face it with the dignity befitting a representative of humanity. The next few hours would determine whether the galaxy remembered humans as victims or as something far more dangerous. The second wave of Cricks bombardment shattered the station's central hub, sending debris spinning into the void. Morrison braced himself against a bulkhead as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, his stomach lurching as sections of the station went into freefall. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, trapping crew members in isolated sections as the once proud diplomatic station began its death spiral. In the command center, Captain Rodriguez coordinated damage control with grim efficiency. Half her crew was already dead or missing. The communication systems were failing and the Cricks fleet showed no signs of letting up. Through the crackling speakers, she could hear Ambassador Chen attempting to contact other diplomatic stations, desperately trying to prevent the conflict from spreading beyond this isolated corner of space. Morrison made his way through the damaged corridors, helping evacuate wounded personnel from the compromised sections. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was using combat training to save lives rather than take them. Each person he pulled from the wreckage was another human who might live to tell the galaxy what had really happened here. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief medical officer, had converted the main dining hall into a makeshift medical bay. Her hands moved efficiently as she treated burns and radiation exposure, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. Jake, I need you to help me move the critical cases to the inner chambers. The radiation shielding is better there. As Morrison helped carry the wounded, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. The Cricks attack was devastating but seemed oddly restrained. A fleet of 12 warships could have reduced the station to atoms within minutes, yet they were maintaining a steady bombardment that slowly dismantled the structure piece by piece. It was almost as if they wanted the humans to suffer, to watch their sanctuary of peace crumble slowly. Ambassador Chen appeared in the medical bay, his diplomatic composure finally cracking. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead, and his usually immaculate suit was torn and stained. I've managed to get a message through to the Zephyrian High Council, he announced. They're calling for an immediate ceasefire and emergency mediation. What did the Cricks say? Dr. Vasquez asked without looking up from her patient. Chen's expression darkened. They said the time for talking ended 200 years ago. They claim the galaxy has been at war with humanity since the day we joined the Concordat, and they're simply the first species brave enough to fire the opening shot. Morrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing life support systems. The implications were staggering. If the Crix could convince other species that humanity was an existential threat, the entire galactic community might turn against them. 50 years of careful diplomacy could be undone in a matter of hours. The station shuddered again, but this time the impact felt different. Through the emergency lighting, Morrison could see Captain Rodriguez's tactical officer pointing at his displays with excitement. "Captain, we're reading massive hyperspace signatures. Multiple fleets are dropping out of FTL at the system's edge." Rodriguez's voice cut through the medical bay's speakers. "All hands? This is the captain. We have confirmation of fleet movements in the system. The Etherian Peace Corps and Verdani Defense Fleet have arrived and are requesting immediate communication with Crix Command." Ambassador Chen staggered to his feet, hope flickering in his eyes. "They came. After everything, they actually came to help us." But Morrison's military training made him skeptical. 2 fleets weren't enough to face down the Crix armada, and arrival at the system's edge was still hours away from effective weapons range. Unless the alien commanders had a plan beyond simply adding their ships to the casualty list, the diplomatic station was still doomed. The answer came 30 minutes later, in a transmission that reached every ship in the system. The voice belonged to Fleet Admiral Kithara of the Etherian Peace Corps. Her words carried through specialized atmospheric chambers that allowed her gaseous form to communicate across species barriers. "Crix Fleet, this is Admiral Kithara. You are firing upon a diplomatic station under the protection of the Galactic Concordat. Cease your bombardment immediately, or face the combined response of the Allied fleets." Supreme Commander Thekvar's response was swift and dismissive. "Etherian vessel, this is a Crix internal security matter. The human infestation requires containment before it spreads further. Withdraw your forces or be classified as collaborators in humanity's crimes against galactic stability." The Etherian. Admiral's reply sent shockwaves through every species monitoring the confrontation. "Commander Thekvar, the Etherian Collective formally recognizes human territorial sovereignty and technological advancement as legitimate under all existing treaties. Any attack on human interests will be considered an attack on Etherian interests." Morrison realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. For the first time since the Treaty of Kepler Station, major species were choosing sides in a conflict. The carefully maintained balance of power that had preserved peace for 2 centuries was crumbling in real time. The Verdani Collective added their voice moments later, their bioship transmissions carrying the unified consensus of their hive-mind leadership. The Verdani stand with humanity. Their innovations in agricultural science have prevented famine on 17 worlds. We will not allow beneficial symbiosis to be destroyed by fear and jealousy. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the station's dying communication system. "Jake, I need you in the command center. We're about to become the center of the biggest diplomatic crisis in galactic history, and I need every able-bodied person coordinating rescue operations." As Morrison made his way through the damaged corridors, he passed the station's memorial wall, where the names of every species that had signed the original peace treaty were etched in crystalline displays. Many of those names would soon be choosing between peace and war, between the security of isolation and the chaos of change. The young Marine realized that his generation would be remembered as either the last to know galactic peace or the first to fight in a new age of interstellar warfare. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders as he entered the command center, where Captain Rodriguez was coordinating with fleet commanders from 3 different species, all trying to prevent the collapse of civilization as they knew it. Through the tactical displays, Morrison could see more hyperspace signatures appearing throughout the system. Word was spreading, and every major power was sending representatives or warships to witness the end of the old order. Whatever happened in the next few hours would determine whether the galaxy moved forward together or tore itself apart in the name of preserving a peace that was already dead. The command center had become a chaotic hub of interstellar diplomacy, with holographic displays showing fleet positions throughout the system. Morrison watched as more ships continued to arrive, each faction taking positions that clearly indicated their allegiances. The galaxy was choosing sides, and humanity found itself at the center of a conflict they had never wanted. Captain Rodriguez coordinated with Dr. Vasquez to establish emergency medical protocols, while Ambassador Chen worked frantically to maintain communication with the arriving fleets. The station's life support systems were failing steadily, giving them perhaps 6 hours before the remaining sections became uninhabitable. "Jake," Rodriguez called out, "I need you to access the emergency beacon array. If we're going down, we need to make sure every transmission gets recorded and broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. History needs to know what really happened here." Morrison nodded and made his way to the beacon control station. Passing through sections where the hull had been breached and emergency force fields were the only thing preventing explosive decompression, the irony struck him that he was fighting to preserve the truth about a peace that was dying around him. The tactical displays showed a standoff developing in space. The Krix fleet maintained position around the crippled station, while the Etherian and Verdani forces held the system's edge. Neither side seemed willing to make the first aggressive move toward the other, but the bombardment of the diplomatic station continued with methodical precision. A new voice cut through the communication static, speaking in the melodic tones of the Zephyrian language before the translation matrix converted it to standard galactic. "This is Crystal Singer Veltar of the Zephyrian High Council. All vessels will cease hostile actions immediately. We invoke the right of final arbitration under Treaty Section 7. Morrison had studied enough diplomatic protocol to recognize the significance. The right of final arbitration hadn't been invoked in over a century, and it required all parties to submit to binding mediation by the oldest member species of the Concordat. The Zephyrians were literally volunteering to put their entire civilization's reputation on the line to stop the conflict. Supreme Commander Thekvar's response was immediate and hostile. "The Krix Empire recognizes no authority higher than our own sovereignty. The Zephyrians have been corrupted by human influence, their crystal matrices polluted by alien thought patterns. We reject your mediation." The rejection sent shockwaves through the galactic diplomatic community. Refusing arbitration was tantamount to declaring war on the entire Concordat structure. Morrison realized he was witnessing the complete collapse of the legal framework that had maintained galactic civilization for 2 centuries. Ambassador Chen staggered over to Morrison's station, his face pale but determined. "Jake, I need you to help me send a message to Earth Command. They need to know that this isn't just about our colony expansion or technological development. The Krix are using us as an excuse to reshape the entire galactic order." As Morrison helped establish the long-range communication link, Chen continued, "The Krix Empire has been stagnating for centuries. Their technology hasn't advanced, their population hasn't grown, and their influence has been steadily declining. They see humanity's rapid development as proof that the current system is flawed, that dynamic species shouldn't be allowed to challenge established hierarchies." The message to Earth took shape, a desperate warning about the broader implications of the attack. Morrison realized that this wasn't just about the diplomatic station, or even about humanity's place in galactic society. This was about whether progress and innovation would be allowed to continue or whether the galaxy would lock itself into permanent stagnation to maintain peace. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled through the communication system. "All personnel, I'm reading massive structural failure in sectors 7 through 12. We need to evacuate those areas immediately." Morrison felt the station shudder around him as another section was lost to the void. Through the tactical displays, he could see debris fields expanding around the station's remains, glittering in the light of the distant star. Each piece of wreckage represented years of careful construction and diplomatic hope. Captain Rodriguez made a decision that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Instead of ordering a general evacuation, she opened a broadcast channel to every ship in the system, human and alien alike. "This is Captain Sarah Rodriguez of Earth Diplomatic Station Kepler 7. We are dying here, shot to pieces by a species we thought were our allies. But before we go, I want every civilization in this system to understand what's really happening. This isn't about humanity being a threat. This is about whether the galaxy will choose growth and cooperation, or fear and control." Her voice carried across the void, reaching the command centers of dozens of warships and diplomatic vessels. "The Krix claim we're expanding too quickly, learning too much, changing too fast. They're right, we are, because that's what intelligent species do. We grow, We explore, we adapt, and we try to make tomorrow better than today. Morrison watched the tactical displays as the human words were translated into dozens of alien languages, broadcast across subspace networks that would carry the message to every corner of galactic civilization. Rodriguez was making humanity's final argument, not just for survival, but for the right to continue being human. If the galaxy decides that progress is too dangerous, that innovation is too disruptive, then you're choosing death over life. You're choosing to become museum pieces, preserved in amber while the universe moves on without you. The response was immediate and unexpected. Fleet Admiral Kethora of the Etherian Peace Corps transmitted on an open channel. Captain Rodriguez speaks truth. The Etherian Collective has watched species rise and fall for millennia. Those who embrace change survive and prosper. Those who fear it become extinct. More voices joined the growing chorus. The Verdani Collective, the Arcturus Trade Federation, the Spiral Arm Alliance. Species after species declared their support for humanity's right to exist and grow. Even some of the neutral factions began transmitting messages of solidarity. But Supreme Commander Thekvar's response was to increase the bombardment, his massive battleships pouring more energy into the dying station. Morrison realized that the Krix leader would rather destroy every witness than allow his actions to be judged by galactic opinion. The irony was perfect and terrible. In trying to contain humanity's influence, the Krix had forced every major civilization to choose a side. Instead of isolating the humans, they had created the largest military alliance in galactic history. The peace was dead, but something new was being born in its place. As Morrison helped coordinate the final evacuation procedures, he couldn't help but wonder what his generation would build from the ashes of the old order. The galaxy would never be the same, but perhaps that was exactly what it needed. The station's death throes were violent and spectacular. Sections broke away in slow motion, spinning into the void while internal fires consumed what remained of the oxygen-rich atmosphere. Morrison helped Dr. Vasquez move the last of the wounded to the central core, where emergency life support might keep them alive for another few hours. Through the observation ports, he could see the incredible sight of the largest fleet gathering in galactic history. Ships from 23 different species had answered Captain Rodriguez's broadcast, forming a defensive perimeter that stretched across millions of kilometers. The massive Verdani bioships pulsed with bioluminescent signals, while Etherian atmospheric vessels released clouds of exotic particles that served as both communication medium and defensive screen. In the command center, Ambassador Chen worked frantically to coordinate what was rapidly becoming an ad hoc military alliance. The species that had gathered weren't natural allies. Some had been trading rivals for centuries. Others had fundamental philosophical differences about governance and territorial expansion. But humanity's crisis had created something unprecedented, a coalition united by the principle that growth and change were not crimes. "Jake," Captain Rodriguez called out, her voice strained but determined, "I need you to interface with the beacon array one more time. We're going to transmit something that will ensure this moment is remembered forever." Morrison nodded and moved to the communication station, which was still functioning despite the massive damage to surrounding systems. As he worked to establish the broad-spectrum transmission link, he realized what Rodriguez was planning. She was going to broadcast the complete record of the Krix attack and the galactic response to every inhabited world in known space. The implications were staggering. Once the recording reached the galactic core worlds and the remote frontier colonies, every civilization would have to choose between the Krix vision of controlled stagnation and the growing alliance of progressive species. There would be no neutral ground left. Supreme Commander Thekvar seemed to realize the same thing. His transmission cut across all frequencies, his voice carrying the authority of millennia of Krix dominance. "Alien vessels, you are supporting a dangerous precedent. Humanity's unchecked expansion threatens the stability that has preserved galactic civilization for 2,000 years. Join us in containing this threat, or be consumed by the chaos they will inevitably create." The response came not from the fleet commanders, but from an unexpected source. Crystal Singer Veltar of the Zephyrian High Council transmitted directly to Thekvar, her harmonic patterns creating complex musical phrases that the translation matrix struggled to convert into words. "Ancient friend, you speak of stability as if it were life itself, but stability without growth is death. The Zephyrians have watched the galaxy evolve for longer than any species here. We have seen empires rise and fall, technologies advance and stagnate, civilizations flourish and decay. The pattern is always the same. Those who embrace change survive, those who fear it perish. Morrison paused in his work to listen as the ancient alien continued. Humanity represents hope, not threat. In 50 years, they have shared more innovations than most species develop in 5 centuries. They have solved food shortages, improved medical techniques, and developed technologies that benefit all. Their crime is not expansion. It is excellence. The words carried weight beyond their literal meaning. The Zephyrians were the eldest species in the Concordat, their civilization predating most others by millions of years. Their support for humanity carried moral authority that even the Cricks couldn't easily dismiss. Dr. Vasquez's voice interrupted Morrison's contemplation. "Captain, we've got major hull breaches in the medical bay. I need to move the critical patients to the command center. It's the only section that's still properly sealed." As the wounded were transported through the dying station, Morrison caught sight of something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Through a breach in the outer hull, he could see the Crick's flagship positioning itself for what appeared to be a final, devastating bombardment. The massive vessel bristled with weapons that could reduce the station's remaining core to vapor in seconds. Captain Rodriguez saw it too. Her face hardened as she made a decision that violated every diplomatic protocol in the book. She opened a channel to the entire system and spoke words that would echo through galactic history. "To every species listening, you are about to witness the true nature of Crick's diplomacy. They are preparing to murder the wounded survivors of a diplomatic station to prevent us from bearing witness to their crimes. This is the stability they offer, the peace of the grave." The effect was immediate and explosive. Fleet Admiral Cathara's atmospheric vessel released a burst of particles that temporarily disrupted the Crick's targeting systems. The Verdani bioships began moving forward, their living hulls adapting to combat configuration. Most dramatically, 3 Arcturus dreadnoughts that had been holding neutral positions suddenly powered up their weapons and moved to defensive positions around the station. Supreme Commander Thekvar found himself facing the nightmare scenario that every military commander dreaded. Overwhelming opposition from multiple directions. His 12 warships were powerful, but they were outnumbered 4-1 by an alliance that had just witnessed him preparing to commit what amounted to war crimes. The standoff stretched across several tense minutes before a new voice entered the confrontation. The transmission came from the edge of the system, where massive hyperspace signatures indicated the arrival of the largest ships any of them had ever seen. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Crick's vessels. You will cease fire immediately and withdraw from this system, or face the consequences." Morrison felt his heart sink as he recognized the name. Admiral Chen was Ambassador Chen's younger brother, and he commanded the most advanced human fleet ever assembled. But even with reinforcements, the humans were still massively outnumbered by the total Crick's military forces. The tactical displays showed the true scope of what was approaching. 16 human dreadnoughts had dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls sleek and predatory compared to the angular Crick's vessels. Behind them came cruiser squadrons, destroyer flotillas, and support vessels that represented the cutting edge of human military technology. But Morrison realized that numbers weren't the point anymore. The galaxy was choosing sides based on principles, not firepower. Every species that supported humanity's right to exist and grow was making a statement about what kind of future they wanted to build. Ambassador Chen managed to establish contact with his brother's flagship. The conversation was brief and professional, but Morrison could hear the emotion beneath the formal words. "Marcus, the situation here has implications far beyond our diplomatic station. The entire galactic order is fracturing along ideological lines." Admiral Chen's response was characteristically direct. "Then we better make sure it fractures in the right direction. Wait, humanity didn't ask for this fight, but we're not going to lose it." As Morrison completed the final transmission protocols, he realized that future historians would mark this moment as the end of the Age of Peace and the beginning of something entirely new. The question wasn't whether war was coming, it was already here. The question was what kind of galaxy would emerge from the ashes of the old order. The space around the dying station erupted into the largest military confrontation in galactic history. Admiral Marcus Chen's fleet took position alongside the Allied vessels, creating a defensive formation that stretched across the entire inner system. The sight was breathtaking and terrifying. Hundreds of warships from dozens of species, all united by humanity's refusal to accept extinction. Morrison felt the station shudder as emergency power finally failed in the outer sections. Through the flickering displays, he could see that they had perhaps 2 hours of life support remaining in the central core. But somehow, dying didn't seem as important as what was happening around them. They had become the catalyst for the galaxy's transformation. Supreme Commander Thekvar faced an impossible tactical situation. His 12 ships, no matter how advanced, couldn't hope to survive against the assembled fleet. But retreating would mean admitting that the Krix Empire couldn't enforce its will on the younger species, effectively ending thousands of years of galactic dominance. The solution came from an unexpected source. Long-range sensors detected massive hyperspace distortions at the system's edge. Not more reinforcements, but something far more ominous. The Krix Empire was committing its entire central battle fleet to the confrontation. Nearly 200 warships that represented the accumulated military might of their ancient civilization. Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the command center's tense atmosphere. All hands, prepare for full evacuation. The Etherians are offering to take our survivors aboard their atmospheric vessels. But Morrison realized that evacuation was no longer just about saving lives. The humans aboard the station had become symbols of resistance against galactic stagnation. Their survival or death would influence how the coming war was remembered and justified. Dr. Vasquez coordinated the transfer of wounded personnel through emergency airlocks, where Etherian rescue craft waited in the station's docking bays. The gaseous beings had modified their atmospheric chambers to support human life, a gesture of solidarity that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. Ambassador Chen refused to leave, insisting that someone with diplomatic authority needed to witness whatever happened next. Morrison made the decision to stay with him, along with Captain Rodriguez and a skeleton crew of volunteers. If this was to be humanity's final statement, it would be delivered by humans. The first shots of the larger battle came from the Arcturus defense fleet, whose dreadnoughts opened fire on Krix advanced scouts at maximum range. The ancient weapons were met by human point defense systems that had been shared with allied species, creating light shows that illuminated the entire system. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the communication system. All allied vessels, this is Admiral Chen. We are not here to conquer or destroy. We are here to defend the right of every species to grow, to learn, and to reach for something better than what they were yesterday. The response from Supreme Commander Thekvar was predictable. Human warship, you speak of growth while your species spreads like a plague across the galaxy. In 50 years, you have claimed more territory than most civilizations acquire in millennia. Your so-called innovations disrupt established trade routes and challenge ancient hierarchies. Morrison listened to the exchange while monitoring the beacon transmissions. The entire confrontation was being broadcast across the galaxy in real time, forcing every civilized world to choose between order and progress. Early responses were already coming in from frontier colonies and core worlds alike, and the pattern was clear. Younger species supported humanity overwhelmingly, while older civilizations were split between fear and fascination. The tactical situation developed with frightening speed. The Krix Central Battle Fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their vessels arranged in the traditional patterns that had dominated galactic warfare for centuries. Against them, the Allied forces seemed chaotic and disorganized, ships from different species using incompatible tactics and communication protocols. But Morrison began to notice something that the Krix had apparently missed. The Allied fleet wasn't disorganized, it was adaptive. Human vessels coordinated with Etherian atmospheric ships to create mobile defense screens. Verdani bioships used their natural camouflage abilities to support Zephyrian crystal vessels that could focus energy beams with unprecedented precision. Each species contributed their unique strengths to a collective strategy that no single civilization could have developed alone. The battle commenced with the largest exchange of firepower in recorded history. Krix plasma cannons refined over millennia met experimental human railguns and Etherian particle projectors, the void filled with energy discharges that could be seen from planets light years away. Captain Rodriguez coordinated with the Allied fleet commanders, while the station continued its slow death around them. Admiral Chen, we're reading massive power fluctuations in the Crick's flagship. Their central command systems might be vulnerable to a concentrated assault. Negative, Captain. Our priority is establishing a defensive perimeter. This isn't about winning a single battle. It's about proving that cooperation can triumph over domination. Morrison realized that Admiral Chen understood the broader implications of the conflict. A devastating human victory would simply replace one form of galactic dominance with another. But a successful defense, led by multiple species working together, would demonstrate that the galaxy's future lay in collaboration rather than hierarchy. The turning point came when the Zephyrian vessels began harmonizing their crystal matrices, creating resonance patterns that disrupted Crick's targeting systems across their entire fleet. The ancient technique had never been used in large-scale warfare, but Crystal Singer Veltar had coordinated with human tacticians to develop new applications for their harmonic abilities. Suddenly, the Cricks found their technological advantages neutralized by innovations they couldn't understand or counter. Weapons that had functioned perfectly for centuries began misfiring. Communication systems experienced interference that made fleet coordination nearly impossible. Supreme Commander Thekvar's response was swift and brutal. Rather than adapt to the new conditions, he ordered his ships to concentrate their fire on the source of the interference. The Zephyrian harmonic vessels became the primary targets, their crystalline hulls shattering under sustained bombardment. The sight of the ancient Zephyrian ships dying for humanity's cause sent shockwaves through both fleets. Crystal Singer Veltar's final transmission was heard across the system as her vessel broke apart. The harmony of progress will outlast the discord of fear. Her sacrifice galvanized the Allied forces like nothing else could have. Species that had remained neutral suddenly joined the battle, their ships emerging from hyperspace to reinforce the defensive lines. The Spiral Arm Confederation, the Outer Rim Trade Alliance, even the isolationist Omega Sector Collective. Civilizations that hadn't participated in galactic politics for centuries were choosing sides. Morrison watched through the tactical displays as the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The Crick's empire, for all its ancient strength, found itself facing not just humanity but the combined will of half the galaxy. The age of single-species dominance was ending, replaced by something unprecedented. A true galactic democracy forged in the fires of war. But the cost was becoming apparent. Ships died on both sides, each loss representing thousands of lives and centuries of accumulated knowledge. The peace that had lasted 200 years was being paid for in blood and fire, and Morrison wondered if what emerged from the chaos would be worth the price. The battle raged for 18 hours, transforming the once peaceful system into a graveyard of shattered starships and broken dreams. Morrison watched through the station's failing sensors as the greatest military engagement in galactic history unfolded around their dying refuge. The tactical displays showed a constantly shifting maze of energy exchanges, with ships from dozens of species locked in deadly combat. The Crick Central Battle Fleet fought with the desperate fury of a civilization watching its supremacy crumble. Their formations, perfected over millennia, proved inadequate against the chaotic innovation of the Allied forces. Human ships darted between Etherian atmospheric screens, while Verdani biovessels regenerated damage that would have crippled conventional warships. The galaxy was learning to fight as one organism, and the lessons were written in fire across the void. Captain Rodriguez coordinated rescue operations while the station's final sections began their inevitable collapse. Emergency force fields flickered and failed as power systems overloaded. But somehow the Central Command Corps maintained life support for the handful of humans who had chosen to bear witness to history's turning point. Ambassador Chen established contact with representatives from 47 different species, creating an impromptu war council that operated from the dying station. His diplomatic training proved invaluable as he helped coordinate between civilizations that had never fought alongside each other. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that humanity's greatest diplomatic achievement was taking place while their diplomatic station died around them. The tide of battle shifted when Admiral Chen made a decision that violated every principle of military strategy. Instead of concentrating his forces for maximum impact, he dispersed the human fleet throughout the Allied formation, placing Earth vessels under alien command structures. The gesture was symbolic as much as tactical. Humanity was choosing to be part of something larger rather than leading it. Morrison watched as human destroyers took orders from Arcturus fleet commanders, while Earth cruisers provided fire support for Verdani bioship assaults. The seamless integration demonstrated something that sent shockwaves through both fleets. Genuine cooperation between species, with fundamentally different approaches to warfare. Supreme Commander Tekvar's response was to concentrate his remaining forces for a final, devastating assault on the station itself. If he couldn't defeat the Allied fleet, he could at least eliminate the humans whose survival had become a symbol of resistance to Crick's authority. The attack came with overwhelming force. 12 Crick's battleships broke from the main engagement, their combined firepower focused on the helpless diplomatic station. Morrison felt the deck plates buckle under his feet as energy discharges that could crack moons struck the station's failing shields. But the Allies had anticipated the move. Etherian atmospheric vessels wrapped themselves around the station like protective clouds, their exotic matter absorbing and dispersing energy that would have vaporized any conventional defense. Verdani bioships regenerated damaged sections of the station's hull, their living tissue bonding with human alloys to create hybrid structures that were stronger than either component, alone. The sight was beautiful and terrifying. Aliens dying to protect humans who had become the symbol of everything they hoped their galaxy could become. Morrison realized that the conflict had transcended its original causes. This was no longer about human expansion or Crick's dominance. It was about whether the future would be shaped by fear or hope. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled through the communication system from the Etherian rescue vessel. Jake, we're reading massive structural instabilities throughout the station. You have maybe 30 minutes before complete collapse. But Morrison found himself reluctant to leave. Through the observation ports, he could see the most incredible sight in galactic history. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species, all fighting for the principle that growth and change were not crimes. Whatever happened next, future generations would remember this moment as the day the galaxy chose its destiny. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The Zephyrian harmonic matrices, damaged but not destroyed, began resonating with crystalline formations on Crick's ships. Crystal Singer Veltar's sacrifice had revealed a fundamental weakness in Crick's technology. Their quantum crystalline cores were vulnerable to harmonic disruption at specific frequencies. Admiral Chen recognized the opportunity immediately. His tactical officers coordinated with surviving Zephyrian vessels to create resonance patterns that propagated through the Crick's fleet's communication networks. One by one, enemy ships began experiencing cascade failures as their core systems fell out of phase with their control matrices. The effect was devastating. Crick's vessels that had dominated space for millennia found themselves powerless, their crews trapped aboard ships that no longer responded to commands. It wasn't destruction, it was paralysis. And somehow that made it more terrifying for a species that had defined itself through military superiority. Supreme Commander Tekvar's final transmission carried the weight of a civilization's death throes. This is what comes of your innovations, humans. You have poisoned the galaxy with your chaotic thinking. Order will not survive your influence. Ambassador Chen's response was broadcast across the system, reaching every ship in both fleets. Commander, order without growth is death. You're right that we've changed things, but change is the only constant in a living universe. The galaxy can evolve with us or become extinct without us. The words carried absolute conviction, and Morrison realized that his diplomatic superior had found the perfect expression of humanity's position. They weren't conquerors or destroyers. They were catalysts for evolution. The galaxy could choose to grow alongside them or stagnate in isolation. The Allied victory was overwhelming and merciful. Disabled Crick's vessels were surrounded but not destroyed. Their crews offered the chance to surrender with honor. Some accepted, their captains recognizing that the old order was truly dead. Others chose to activate self-destruct sequences rather than accept defeat, their final explosions serving as funeral pyres for an age that would never return. As the battle wound down, Morrison finally allowed himself to be evacuated to the Etherian rescue vessel. Looking back at the shattered remains of the diplomatic station, he realized that its destruction had accomplished more than its 2 centuries of peaceful operation. The station had been a symbol of cooperation between equals, But its death had created something far more powerful. A genuine alliance between species committed to shared growth and mutual protection. The galaxy would never be the same. The Krix Empire was broken, their ancient dominance replaced by a fluid coalition of progressive civilizations. Some species would choose isolation over integration, but the majority had decided that humanity's chaotic energy was exactly what their stagnating civilizations needed. Morrison's last sight of the battle zone was the wreckage of two different ages floating together in the void, the ordered remains of Krix vessels alongside the adaptive fragments of Allied ships. Future archaeologists would study these debris fields to understand how the galaxy learned to embrace change instead of fearing it.